Alright guys, here's another O-ring video that I didn't expect to make, but I took apart this engine from the engine that I just bought for the E55. It was from a 2006 CL55 with actually less mileage than that one. And when I removed the oil pump, I just took the oil pump off because I wanted to replace that O-ring anyways, the O-ring that broke in the E55 and caused the engine to blow. And the same problem, O-ring was hard as plastic. I had a look at the bearings, and here's what the bearings look like. So the bearings, like they were, I think, like I'm not sure if they would be considered spun bearings or not, because they were just like slightly off their position where they should be. But you can definitely see scoring on the back of these bearings. And if you look at the connecting rod end cap, you can see the same thing going on. So I decided to set up a bit of a test to actually test these O-rings and what happens like when these go hard or when they break. So I set up this test over here with the oil pump and with the sump filled with oil, and I spun it with my impact driver. And I tested different O-rings in it. I tested the broken one, I tested this hardened O-ring, and then I tested a new O-ring. And for all the people that were arguing that you can't blow an engine from a broken O-ring, you'll actually be pretty surprised at the results. Just to show you guys a close-up of these bearings before I get into the test. So the bearing on the right is the one I was talking about that seems like it was spun. So you can see the scoring on the backside, and the bearing on the left is what a bearing should look like. So you can see the backside of that bearing has no score marks or anything at all. So this bearing wasn't too bad at this point, but it still shows you that there was definitely something oil related going on in this car. And I think from the test it will be pretty clear why that happened. So I guess I'll start off by showing you guys the test, because that's probably what you guys want to see the most. And then after that I'll show you how to actually remove one of these O-rings from the car. And I also got an oil pressure gauge, which I'm going to be installing really soon after I get all this engine stuff sorted. So that should also be coming out hopefully soon. First I want to show you how the pump flows when I put the good O-ring in, so the one that's actually not hardened. I got this O-ring from the dealers, and this is actually not the exact part number that should go inside here, but it's one of the close enough part numbers that fits. Just to tell you what you're seeing in the test, that port over there is basically the output that goes to your entire engine. So whatever oil is coming out of there is the oil that's going out to your engine. If you want to see the full detail on how this oil system works, I explained that in the previous video. You can watch that one to better understand how this whole oil system works. First I tested the operation of the scavenging section, so basically I only put oil in the front sump, and then I turned the pump, and then you can see that it basically scavenges all the oil from the front sump and it flows it to the sump at the back. Next I filled both the sumps with oil, and then I did the test with the proper O-ring. And in this test you can see that the output coming out from the pump, the main output that goes out to your engine, it's a constant flow of oil. There's no bubbles in there, or there's no, it's just one constant stream of oil, and that's how it should be. Next I put the hard rubber in there, the rubber that I found in this car, in this oil pump originally. So I put that back in the oil pump, I closed it back together, filled some more oil. And this time you can clearly see that there's bubbles coming on the output. That clearly means that this O-ring is already leaking, so there's actually bubbles going into your oil supply. I didn't do this for too long because oil was spinning all over the place when I was doing it, and I knew I had to clean up the mess after, so that's why I wasn't spinning it for too long, but I'll show you the same thing in slow motion. So next I took the broken O-ring from the E55, the one that I found in my car originally, the engine that blew, and I put that in this oil pump, and then I spun it. And you can clearly see that there's almost nothing coming out of it. The only thing that's coming out is splashes. And the thing is that your car just doesn't need like splashes of oil going to it. It actually needs a constant oil pressure. So obviously with these splashes there was pretty much no pressure going to the engine at all. And I was spinning it pretty fast. I spun it, my impact driver goes to a maximum of 3000 RPM. And even spinning it at max speed, there was nothing coming out of the oil pump. So for everyone that's saying the engine didn't blow because of a broken O-ring, that's pretty much like saying the engine will run without oil pressure. No engine will run without oil pressure. Any engine will basically destroy itself in a matter of a few minutes if it loses oil pressure. And with this O-ring you can clearly see that there's no flow going to the engine at all. So like I said in the previous video, that's obviously what blew the engine. So yeah, there you go. There's two different oil pumps from two different engines from two completely different cars. One is from a 2004 E55. That engine's from a 2006 CLS 55. And they both have the same problem. They both have O-rings that are hardened. They both have bearings that are spun. So the same thing going on in both engines. Right now I'm not sure what to do with the engine, whether I should just return it at this point or whether I should just change the bearings and change the O-ring and use it. The bearings definitely need replacement, but the rest of the engine is still okay. Like the cylinder walls aren't scratched. I can see some scratches on the pistons, but it's not too bad. So I'm gonna discuss it with a few people. This was on a weekend, so I couldn't talk to anyone about it. So tomorrow I'm gonna talk to the dealers and a few other mechanics on what I should do with that engine, whether I should keep it or replace it. But the thing is, at this point, I'm not even sure if I'm gonna find any clean M113K because the only two engines I've opened that have the same problem, the same spun bearings, the same thing going on. My personal opinion says that the engine is not too bad, so I think I should just stick with this one. Just replace the bearings. The bearings would definitely need replacement. And other than that, I think the engine is still fine. But I'll still show it to some people and get some more advice on it. But anyways, getting to how to actually replace one of these O-rings, I'll show you how to do that. If you decide to do this on an engine stand, make sure not to mount your engine stand on the top four holes because all that section is actually going to be coming off along with the upper oil pan when you remove it. So first I just started off with draining all the oil because I had to flip the engine over. And if you didn't know from this video already, this engine actually has two oil sumps, so one is at the front and one is at the back. After that I had to flip the engine over. Next I removed these E10 bolts that hold the lower oil pan in place. And once all the bolts are removed, all you need to do is just tap it with a hammer and a chisel just slightly just to break the oil pan loose of the gasket maker. And then you need to pry it. My one was stuck in place, so I had to use two screwdrivers just to like pry it a little better. Once that's off, you need to remove this plate that sits on top of the upper oil pan, and it's held in place by these 10mm hex bolts. After removing that, there's a whole bunch of bolts for the upper oil pan that go all around the upper oil pan. Just make sure to remove them and be careful not to drop any of those bolts in the engine because then you'll be in big trouble. After that, just pry the upper oil pan and it should come off. After that, there's just these torque bolts that hold the oil pump in place. I believe they're T50 torques. But yeah, there's two on this side and then there's one on the other side of the oil pump. Just remove all of these, and then other than that, there's just these smaller Torx bolts that just hold the tube in place. And once all these are removed, your oil pump should just come off. For removing this pipe from the pump, there's just two Torx bolts that are holding it in, so just remove those bolts, and the whole pipe is just one long section, so it all just comes off as one. And then the rubber O-ring is inside the other part. So that's all for this video. If any of you happen to open your M113K engines and replace one of these O-rings, do let me know whatever condition you find that in, or whether you also find your bearing spun in the car. Because this is now from a completely different car. From the previous car, people said I tracked that car, so obviously oil temperatures get really high, so the rubber hardens, all that stuff. But this is from a completely different car. The car had a stock supercharger pulley, so clearly the person probably hadn't been racing or anything. I do have another car with an M113 engine, that's an SL500, but that one doesn't have this dual sump in it. It doesn't seem like there's any issues going on that car, but I'll also put an oil pressure sensor on that car just to make sure that everything is normal. But I definitely think this is a big issue since I opened two engines and I see the same thing inside them. So yeah, if it happens to anyone else, please do let me know whatever you find inside your cars. This could be related to something that, because these cars are in Canada, so like because of the winter in the winter it gets really cold over here, and I believe both these cars were winter driven. So in the winter, obviously rubber goes through like much bigger heat cycles, like it cools down then it heats up again with the engine. People say that it's because of not changing your oil frequently or something like that. On this engine, maybe I can believe that because the engine wasn't the cleanest engine from the inside. But my engine was super clean from inside. That engine was super clean, so there's no reason why an O-ring should harden because of someone not changing his oil, because clearly that engine's been in good hands all its life, judging by the condition inside the engine. And for that engine, I went through the entire oil system. Like I blew air through every oil line in the engine, and there was air flowing through it. There was no gunk in the engine. Everything was clean inside the engine. And also let me know about that oil chain actually. That's one of the weird things I found in both engines, that the oil chain is actually touching against the block and scraping the block. The same thing in both engines too. So yeah, it definitely doesn't seem like the best design going in these cars. But anyways, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.